start with the basics. What exactly is a tariff? Think of it like a special kind of tax. This isn't a tax you pay on your income, or when you buy something at your local store that was made in your own country. Instead, a tariff is a tax that a government charges on goods that are imported from other countries. So if a company in America wants to bring in, say, a shipment of French cheese or German cars, the United States government might add a tariff, an extra cost, to those items before they can be sold here. This, of course, makes those imported goods more expensive for the businesses bringing them in, and often for the consumers who eventually buy them. It's a deliberate move to influence trade. Governments use tariffs for several reasons, and it's rarely just about one single objective. Primarily, they can be a tool to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. If American-made widgets are struggling to compete with cheaper imported widgets, a tariff on the foreign ones can make the local products seem more price competitive. Tariffs can also be a source of revenue for the government, although this is often a secondary consideration compared to their protective or strategic uses. Sometimes tariffs are employed as a bargaining chip in international trade negotiations, or even as a punitive measure if one country believes another is not playing fair by global trade rules, perhaps by subsidizing its own industries too heavily, or dumping goods at below-market prices. Consider something many people enjoy, like a specific brand of Italian olive oil, or perhaps a high-quality electronic device manufactured in Asia. If a new tariff is slapped on these items, the importer has to pay that extra tax. That cost usually doesn't just disappear. The importer might absorb some of it to remain competitive, but often a significant portion of that tariff cost is passed down the line. First, it goes to the wholesaler, then to the retailer, and finally, it often lands on the price tag you see in the store. So that favorite olive oil or gadget suddenly costs you more, directly because of a decision made about international trade policy and taxes. It's also crucial to understand that tariffs can spark a chain reaction. When one country imposes tariffs on another's goods, the affected country often doesn't just accept it quietly. They might retaliate by imposing their own tariffs on goods imported from the country that started it. This can lead to what's known as a trade war, where countries go back and forth, raising tariffs on various products. This kind of escalating conflict can disrupt global trade flows, create a lot of uncertainty for businesses involved in international commerce, and ultimately harm economies on both sides of the dispute, making a wide range of products more expensive for everyone involved in the long run. Now, let's turn to a specific and rather significant proposal. Former President Donald Trump has floated the idea of imposing a new, hefty 50% tariff on goods coming into the United States from the European Union. This isn't a minor adjustment. A 50% tariff is a very substantial increase in the cost of importing these goods. It would represent a dramatic shift in trade policy with one of America's largest trading partners. Such a move would undoubtedly send ripples, or perhaps even waves, across the Atlantic, affecting a vast array of products that Americans consume and European businesses export, from luxury cars and aircraft parts to agricultural products like wine and cheese and fashion items. Why would former President Trump suggest such a drastic measure? His stated rationale often centers on the idea of leveling the playing field for American businesses and workers. He has frequently argued that other countries, including those in the European Union, have unfair trade practices such as their own tariffs or subsidies that put American products at a disadvantage. From his perspective, imposing strong tariffs is a way to counteract these perceived imbalances, protect American industries from what he views as unfair foreign competition, and encourage more manufacturing to happen within the United States. The goal, as he often frames it, is to bring jobs back to America and ensure fairer trade deals for the United States. If these 50% tariffs were actually put into place, the immediate impact would likely be a sharp increase in the prices of European goods sold in the United States. Imagine going to buy a German car, a bottle of French wine, or some Italian designer clothing. All of these could suddenly become significantly more expensive. This price hike wouldn't just affect luxury items. Many everyday products and components used in American manufacturing also come from Europe. Businesses that rely on these imports would face higher costs, which they would either have to absorb, reducing their profits, or pass on to consumers, further fueling price increases for American families already dealing with economic pressures. Naturally, the European Union would be highly unlikely to accept such a massive tariff without responding in kind. We could expect swift and substantial retaliatory tariffs from the European Union on American goods being sold in Europe. This would hurt United States exporters, from farmers selling soybeans and almonds to manufacturers shipping machinery and technology. American companies trying to compete in the European market would find their products suddenly much more expensive, potentially losing sales and market share to competitors from other parts of the world. This kind of tit-for-tat escalation is precisely how damaging trade wars begin, creating a cycle of protectionism that ultimately restricts trade and economic growth for all involved parties. When prominent figures like a former president suggest major policy shifts, such as a 50% tariff, economists and policy experts pay close attention. Professor Justin Wolfers, an economist and public policy expert at the University of Michigan, has weighed in on these kinds of proposals. He characterized former President Trump's latest tariff threats, particularly their sweeping nature, as creating an uncertainty shock for the economy. This term might sound academic, but its implications are very real for businesses and individuals. It highlights the destabilizing effect that the mere suggestion of such drastic policy changes can have, even before any specific action is taken by the government or regulatory bodies. So, what exactly does an uncertainty shock mean in practical terms, especially for businesses trying to operate and grow? Imagine you're running a company that imports components from Europe or exports finished products to European Union countries. If there's a credible threat of a 50% tariff looming, it becomes incredibly difficult to make long-term plans. Should you invest in new equipment? Should you hire more workers? Should you sign new contracts with suppliers or distributors? All these decisions become fraught with risk when the fundamental rules of trade could change so dramatically and unpredictably. This hesitation and paralysis in decision-making can slow down investment, hiring, and overall economic activity significantly. Beyond the immediate uncertainty, economists like Professor Wolfers point to broader potential economic consequences if such tariffs were implemented. One of the most direct impacts would likely be increased inflation. If imported goods become 50% more expensive, those costs will likely be passed on to consumers, pushing up the prices of many items. Consumers would also face reduced choice, as some European products might become too expensive to import or sell viably. Furthermore, there's a real risk of job losses, while some domestic industries might see a temporary boost from reduced foreign competition. Sectors that rely on imported European components, or that export heavily to the European Union, could be forced to downsize due to higher costs or lost markets. The imposition of such high tariffs can also lead to significant disruptions in global supply chains. Over decades, businesses have built complex networks for sourcing materials, manufacturing components, and assembling final products across different countries to maximize efficiency and minimize costs. A sudden 50% tariff on European Union goods would force many American companies to urgently re-evaluate these supply chains. They might have to search for alternative suppliers outside of Europe, which can be a costly, time-consuming, and often difficult process. This reshuffling adds another layer of instability and expense, potentially leading to production delays and further price increases for consumers as businesses adapt to a new, more fragmented trade landscape. Ultimately, these high-level discussions about tariffs and trade policy have very tangible effects on everyday people and their household finances. If a 50% tariff is placed on a wide range of European goods, the most direct consequence for consumers in the United States is that many of these items will become more expensive. This means your weekly grocery bill could go up if you buy imported cheeses or wines. The cost of a new car could increase if it's a European model or contains significant European parts. This reduction in purchasing power means families have less money left over for other necessities, savings, or discretionary spending, impacting their overall quality of life. For businesses, the impact of such tariffs can be a mixed bag, though many would likely face significant challenges. American companies that compete directly with European imports might see an initial advantage as foreign goods become pricier. However, a vast number of United States businesses rely on imported European components, machinery, or raw materials. For them, a 50% tariff means a sudden surge in their operating costs, making it harder to compete both domestically and globally. Small and medium-sized enterprises, which often have tighter margins, could be particularly vulnerable to these increased expenses, potentially leading to business closures or cutbacks if they cannot adapt quickly enough. It's also interesting to note that discussions around such significant trade policy shifts often occur alongside other major governmental financial deliberations. For instance, there's mention of a budget bill, reportedly associated with the former president, that is headed to the Senate. While seemingly separate, these issues can be interconnected. Tariffs, if implemented, do generate revenue for the government. However, if those same tariffs lead to an economic slowdown, reduced business activity, and job losses, it could negatively impact overall tax revenues from income and corporate taxes. Furthermore, a struggling economy might require more government spending on support programs, creating a complex interplay between trade policy decisions and the national budget. In summary, the possible outcomes of imposing a 50% tariff on European Union goods are multifaceted and largely concerning for many economists. While the stated aim might be to protect American industries and rebalance trade, the more probable results include higher prices for American consumers, increased costs for many United States businesses, and likely retaliatory measures from the European Union, sparking a damaging trade war. This scenario could strain international relations, disrupt established supply chains, and inject a great deal of uncertainty into the global economy. The path forward on trade requires careful consideration of all these potential ripple effects on businesses, workers, and families both in America and across the Atlantic.